Stella was a great wife, and she loved me very much. Until she brought home her ex-boyfriend's son and begged me to adopt him. She even asked our 4-year-old son to give up his bedroom. Let Caden have it, okay? You're the big brother. I had to laugh. I threw her things and the boy's stuff out the door and changed the locks. The number you have dialed is busy. Please try again later. When I heard the automated voice for the 3rd time, a wave of panic washed over me. In 5 years of marriage, Stella had never been unreachable. Even if she was in a meeting and couldn't pick up, she'd always text me right back. Today was field day at Michael's preschool, and at least one parent was required to attend. My mom hadn't been feeling well the last couple of days, so I was staying with her at the hospital. Stella had said she'd take the day off to go. A little while ago, I took my mom downstairs for some fresh air, leaving my phone to charge in her room. When I came back, I saw several missed calls from the preschool. The teacher told me that every other child had a parent there cheering them on, but Stella never showed. Michael was holding his soccer ball and crying his eyes out. Maybe it was because Stella and I had always given him so much love and attention, but Michael was usually a very well-behaved kid. The reason he was so upset today was because Stella had promised to help him win first place in the soccer competition, but she'd broken her promise. In the cab on the way to the preschool, I kept trying to call Stella, but her phone was still busy. Just as my mind started racing with worst-case scenarios, a coworker of hers messaged me back. Hey Leo, Stella took some PTO. She hasn't been in the office for a few days. Is everything okay at home? I typed and deleted my reply over and over. I had no idea how to answer such a simple question. Earlier this year, Stella had said she wanted to save her vacation days for our 6th wedding anniversary at the end of the year. The 3 of us were going to take a trip abroad. Why had she suddenly taken time off without telling me? I called my in-laws, but they didn't know what was going on either. My hand, gripping the phone, was slick with a thin layer of sweat. Could something have happened to Stella? The traffic report on the cab's radio and the local news alerts popping up on my phone had my heart in my throat. Field day wasn't over yet. The sounds of kids and parents laughing and cheering echoed across the campus. At the preschool gate, Michael was holding his soccer ball, his head down as he followed his teacher. When he heard my voice, he ran to me, his eyes still shimmering with tears. Michael's dad, is everything all right? The teacher looked worried as she ruffled Michael's hair. I shook my head and thanked her, then helped Michael into the cab. Dad, tell Mom it's okay if I don't get first place. Since his mom hadn't shown up, Michael thought he must have asked for too much. I pulled him into my arms and comforted him softly, my own voice trembling slightly. For 2 hours after we got home, I didn't take off my shoes or have a sip of water. I just sat on the bench in the entryway, watching the sunlight creep away from my feet. Beep! It was the sound of the smart lock. Mommy! Michael ran over with a toy in his arms. I shot up so fast my head spun, but I still managed to take a step toward the door. I needed to see with my own eyes that Stella was okay. As my vision cleared, I finally saw her pleading smile, but it wasn't for me or our son, who had been worried sick all afternoon. It was for the little boy she held in her arms. Caden, from now on, this is your new home. I held my son's hand and waited. It wasn't until the light in the room had dimmed a few shades darker that Stella's gaze finally turned to us. It was soft but also apologetic. Leo, this is Caden.
Ardesson.
Darkness swallowed me whole, long before the sun had set outside. I looked at the boy, unable to muster anything close to a friendly smile. Howard. He was a senior when I was at NYU, and a picture of him and Stella was printed in the university's promotional magazine. He was the one that got away, the first love she'd been crazy about for years. My 4 years at NYU were practically spent hearing stories about Stella and Howard's epic romance. Countless classmates saw them as the main characters of a real-life romance novel. They were from the same hometown and didn't come from money, but they pushed each other to get into a top school like NYU. Stella had better grades, but she willingly passed up better offers to be with Howard. And during college, Howard turned down several wealthy girls who pursued him, his heart set only on Stella. But even this storybook couple couldn't escape the post-graduation breakup season. Howard got a scholarship to study abroad, while Stella stayed at NYU for grad school. They said it was an amicable split, but after that, no one dared to mention Howard's name in front of her. At NYU, I took over for Stella as president of the debate club. Internally, she was my toughest opponent. Externally, I was her strongest ally. At some point, I started avoiding being alone with her. If we had to discuss something, I'd make sure to start a group chat. Even during debates, I gave up the second debater spot next to her and moved to the end of the line. I'd built such a clear boundary around our friendship that it was like a wall of ice between us. We were cold and distant, and it seemed that after college, our lives would become two parallel lines that would never cross. Until the alumni reunion 2 years after graduation, when our old club members started teasing us and trying to set us up. It was crowded and chaotic. Someone pushed me, and I stumbled into Stella's arms. Amid the smell of alcohol, the wall of ice around my heart melted into a thin sheet, and then it was shattered by the sound of 2 heartbeats, both too fast to control. Howard was like the most cryptic page in the book of Stella's world. She'd struggled with it, puzzled over it for a long time, until she finally turned the page. Only then did her stalled life seem to jump into fast forward. Stella's best friends made bets on what kind of man it would take for her to get over her heartbreak. They thought it would have to be someone even more dazzling than Howard. But the person Stella decided to pursue was me. All it took was planting a single rose seed in my heart, and it grew with passionate, happy abandon. Stella would get up before dawn to stand in line and bring me the first batch of breakfast burritos from the cart lady. When I had a stomach flu so bad I could barely move, she skipped work to buy all sorts of stomach medicine and heating pads and had a delivery guy bring them over. She filled prayer cards with wishes that all started with my name. She would kiss me whenever she felt happy, for a cup of coffee I'd made too sweet, or for the autumn wind that rustled my shirt hem. Stella proposed to me when the whole city was blooming with roses. It was as if she was declaring that she no longer regretted losing her son. But leaving isn't a true loss. Death is. Howard, divorced and with a son, had returned to the country. He was proud and stubborn, and he couldn't handle the gossip back in his hometown. He drove drunk and got into an accident. The sun had completely sunk below the horizon. Stella and I stood in opposite corners of the dark bedroom. Neither of us thought to turn on a light. Leo, Howard's ex-wife, doesn't want the kid, and his father isn't in good health. He had no one else to ask but me. Can he just live with us? Please? I promise you and Michael will always be the most important people in my heart. I tried to see her face clearly, to know whether she was saying this out of pure pity for a fatherless child, or if her love for the father now extended to the son. But I couldn't see anything. In the darkness, a pair of arms tried to embrace me. Stella. I took a step back. Saying her name felt suddenly, uncomfortably strange. Michael waited at the school gate for a long time today, holding his soccer ball. He waited until someone else was holding up the championship trophy, and you still didn't show. I just want to ask you one thing right now. Is this child yours? Caden looked a little older, which would place his conception around the time Stella started pursuing me. I thought back to that alumni reunion, when a tipsy Stella and I were pushed together. In the midst of the laughing, boisterous crowd, I vaguely remembered seeing Howard's silhouette. And at that time, his wedding abroad was less than a week away. When Stella, feigning drunkenness, kissed me in front of everyone, it wasn't her saying goodbye to the past. She knew Howard was watching. She wanted to put his mind at ease. How ridiculous of me. I'd mistaken a performance for a real connection and fallen completely. The moment the light flickered on, I saw the flustered look on Stella's face before she could hide it. Leo, it was really Ken who asked me. When I was able to come to NYU, his dad and the neighbors all chipped in to help me. I closed my eyes. I understood everything. Stella was the best debater. On stage, she could counter any argument and force her opponents to surrender. But just now, she dodged my question like a debater with stage fright. Stella, I don't want a vague answer. Take him to the hospital for a paternity test. As for us, I pulled open the door, forced a slight smile at the 2 kids standing there, and took Michael's hand to leave. Let's talk again when the test results are out. Stella started to follow, but Caden's crying stopped her in her tracks. Standing in the elevator, just as the doors were about to close for the third time, I grabbed Michael's hand to stop him from pressing the open button again. My son was on his tiptoes, peeking through the crack in the doors toward our apartment. But his waiting was in vain. His mother was busy comforting another child. The thought of Caden's connection to Stella felt like an invisible rope tightening around me, causing pain all over my body. I breathed carefully until my tense, trembling body calmed down. Michael, Mom's busy for a few days. Let's go stay with Grandpa. When Dad saw me bring Michael home, he didn't ask any questions. That evening, he personally cooked our favorite noodles. I felt at ease with him putting Michael to bed. I went to the hospital to stay with Mom until almost dawn, then came home for a quick nap. When my alarm went off, I jolted upright. Dad's voice came from the other room. Michael's mom came by early this morning to take him to school. You should get some more sleep, Leo. Stella was trying to make amends. The cold expression that had formed on my face at the first mention of her name softened slightly. As long as her heart and her actions remained loyal to me and our family, I could give her a chance. I went back to sleep for a bit. When I woke up, Dad had just gotten back from the hospital. He then remembered to tell me that Stella had come back right after dropping Michael off. She was carrying fruit and milk and had been waiting outside my door for me to open it. My parents lived in an old staff housing complex, on the second floor of a walk-up. Neighbors going up and down the stairs could see Stella and the little boy she had with her, and the gossip was non-stop. When my dad mentioned the boy, his face darkened. Is that boy hers from an affair? I shook my head. I didn't want my parents to worry about that until the test results were back. Dad let out a breath, leaned back in his chair, and asked me what had happened. My dad, being a kind man, immediately felt sorry for the boy who had lost his father. But he also knew that my refusal to adopt wasn't out of sheer heartlessness. Is it that, all these years, Stella has had someone else in her heart? That question had been circling in my mind all night, a thought I hadn't dared to touch. But my dad had finally said it out loud. I should have been absolutely certain that Stella hadn't been in contact with Howard all these years. Even at class reunions, if someone brought up what he was doing, Stella would pull me to the other side of the room for a drinking game. We had full access to each other's phones, and she really didn't have any of Howard's contact information saved. And after Howard added me on a messaging app back in the debate club days, his feed had always been hidden from me. But no contact didn't mean no longing. What if Howard still loved Stella? What if Stella had known about Caden all along? Flashes of Stella's gentleness and happiness from the past 5 years flooded my mind. Suddenly, they were screaming, shattering, revealing the cold indifference behind them. I slammed my fist on the table with a dull thud. When I came to my senses, I was drenched in sweat. My dad got up nervously to send away the people at the door, afraid they would agitate me. Stella heard the noise and started knocking, her voice laced with an unusual urgency. This sudden loss of control, something I'd never experienced before, left me momentarily stunned. After a long while, I heard my own calm voice. I told my dad to let Stella and the boy in. I couldn't run from a problem I had to face. One thing was clear. If I wanted to save my marriage to Stella, I could never accept Caden. His existence would be a constant reminder of how much Stella had loved another man before me. From now on, every second I spent with her would be filled with suspicion and doubt, transforming me into someone unrecognizable. I heard Stella's voice at the door, cheerfully greeting my dad, and the boy's clear voice calling him Grandpa. You don't hit a smiling face, so my dad couldn't keep a stern expression. I looked away, rehearsing my arguments in my head, preparing to win this confrontation with Stella with the same composure I used in debate. Stella, where are you going? Leo is waiting for you. I whipped my head around to see my dad standing alone at the door, fruit rolling all over the floor at his feet. Without even changing my shoes, I rushed downstairs and blocked Stella's car as she was about to drive away. She was in a hurry, the blood vessels in her eyes looking like they were about to burst. Caden's grandpa isn't feeling well. He was just admitted to the hospital. I have to go see him. Leo, Get out of the way. Amid the child's shrill cries, I froze for a few seconds. Just as I was about to step back, Stella's car lurched forward. The bumper scraped hard against my knee, leaving a searing pain. The car turned a corner and disappeared from sight, as if it were taking Stella completely out of my life. I stood there, suddenly feeling an immense emptiness. My own mother had been in the hospital for nearly a month. When had Stella, her daughter-in-law, ever shown this kind of urgency? Howard might have been left in the past, left outside of time, but Stella had never forgotten him. He was always there, colorless and formless, filling every empty moment of our 5 years together. More bewildering than the thought of losing Stella completely was the realization that maybe I never had her at all. Stella must have been busy taking care of Ken and finding a school for Caden. I was busy too during that time. I didn't reach out, nor did I reply to her daily goodnight texts. My mom was discharged from the hospital. To keep her from worrying, my dad and I hid the situation from her, just saying I was concerned about her health and was staying for a few days. When I took Michael home to pack some clothes, Stella wasn't there. My son cheered when I told him he could bring a few extra toys. But when I turned to go into the master bedroom to pack, I heard Michael start to cry. I dropped the folded clothes and rushed out. I saw what used to be Michael's space gray and blue room had been redecorated with a full-on pirate ship theme. From the curtains to the carpet, from the bed sheets to the toys on display, everything had been changed to an adventure style. It was obvious this was the room Stella planned to give to Caden. Michael couldn't find his favorite toys or his pillowcase. He hugged my leg, his body trembling with sobs. I dug my nails into my palm to suppress my anger. After finally calming Michael down, I took my phone to the balcony and called Stella. Michael's the older brother. I'm sure he's willing to give the south-facing bedroom to his little brother. Leo, don't make a big deal out of nothing. It's just switching rooms. When I get back, just switching rooms? I didn't wait to hear the rest of her explanation. I hung up. On the sofa, Michael was asleep, clutching a toy he'd found in a large cardboard box from the study. Tear tracks stained his cheeks, and his little mouth was puckered in a pout of ultimate grievance. He wasn't a grown-up. He was only 4. He hadn't even learned how to willingly turn off his favorite cartoon. How could he be generous enough to give up his familiar room and his mother to someone else? I picked up the toy cars scattered around the living room one by one, until I walked into the kitchen. I opened the fridge. Inside were neatly arranged bags of herbal medicine. The bitter, brown liquid seemed to rise from my heart and spread through my entire body before I even tasted it. When we were first married and planning our future, Stella and I had disagreed about having children. She wanted a daughter, to spoil her like a little princess and give her the best of everything. Even though Michael was a boy, he looked like me, which thrilled Stella as a new mother. She personally designed his room. Stella had said that if we ever had a daughter, Michael would have to move into the study. She wanted to save the best southern sunlight for her beloved daughter. Now, she was giving the best sunlight to Caden. If my daughter ever came, how wronged would she feel? In the silence, I numbly tore open the bags of medicine one by one, pouring them down the drain, watching the brown liquid swirl and disappear. Then I made a call. Hello, I need to have a lock changed. I put Caden's things and a bag of Stella's clothes by the door. She would have found she was locked out when she brought Caden back. I informed Stella that my mom had just recovered and that the stairs in the old staff building were still a bit much for her, so I was bringing my parents to live with us for a while. My parents would take the master bedroom, and Michael and I would naturally take the second bedroom. Before Stella could suggest Caden stay in the den, I cut her off. Stella, the north-facing den doesn't get any sun. It wouldn't be fair to Caden. Why don't you find him another south-facing apartment somewhere else? Stella was silent on the other end for a moment, then agreed. My parents were going to pay the down payment on our apartment, but Stella had insisted on writing them an IOU. Stella worked at a multinational corporation with a good salary and had been promoted to department head the year before last. She actually had more of a say in this apartment, but she conceded. She rented a 2-bedroom near her company for Ken and Caden and moved into the company dorm herself. I couldn't say if my disappointment had grown even deeper. Stella's concession didn't bring me a single ounce of victorious joy. A debate has a winner and a loser, but the discourse itself doesn't. Just like a marriage can have a winner and a loser, but when it comes to feelings, the failure never belongs to just one person. Lately, I'd mentioned wanting to open a shop to Stella a few times, but she hadn't paid it any mind. Over the past few days, I had scoured all the storefronts around NYU and finally settled on this small shop with the right location, size, and rent. When the renovations were halfway done, I discovered the foreman was cutting corners using cheap, off-brand panels with dangerously high formaldehyde levels. Seeing that I was mild-mannered and always came to the site alone, the foreman grew contemptuous and started verbally threatening me, trying to make me back down. These scumbags didn't care about contracts or the law. I had no choice but to call Stella. Subconsciously, I still believed that as long as Stella and I were a team, there was no problem we couldn't solve. Substandard developers, rude and disruptive neighbors, and unscrupulous preschools had all been defeated by us. But by the time the foreman snatched my phone and smashed it on the ground, I still hadn't heard Stella's voice. Stella, who at our wedding had promised to always face every difficulty with me, couldn't even be bothered to return a single phone call now. She was just so busy. The foreman and his crew cornered me in the shop. They tore up the contract and started banging on the paint cans around me with their tools and scraps of wood, trying to force me to pay the final balance. I summoned my courage and continued to defend my rights, but I inadvertently enraged them. Trash the place. Teach the boss a lesson. Weren't you trying to call someone just now? Let's see who dares to mess with my business. After the foreman yelled, he was about to grab my arm. Suddenly, a tall woman rushed in from outside. Before I could get a clear look at her, she had already shoved the foreman aside, forcefully shielding me behind her, and warned that if they laid another hand on me, it would be an open and shut case for the police. I almost called out Stella's name, but in the next second, I let my hand fall limp. It wasn't her. Couldn't be her. Finally, the police arrived and took the construction crew away for suspected disorderly conduct. After giving my statement, I dazedly found myself back at the shop's entrance. The woman stood quietly beside me. She looked to be in her mid-20s, with metal-framed glasses that gave her a gentle, scholarly air. You'd never guess that just 2 hours earlier, she had stood her ground against several thugs without getting the worst of it. During the police report, I remembered her name was Ivy Lynn, a third-year grad student at NYU. Ivy, thank you for today. When the shop opens, coffee's on me. Looking at the mess inside the shop, I sighed. I was afraid I wouldn't make the original opening date. I rolled up my sleeves, about to start picking up the debris, but someone beat me to it. Ivy took off her jacket, put her glasses in her pocket, and casually slipped on a work smock. Seeing my confusion, she pointed to the now hiring sign on the door and smiled. Boss, I'm here to apply for the job. My study cafe finally opened. With Ivy helping out in the shop, I had more free time and could still take care of Michael. On the third day of business, Stella called, wanting to talk. Figuring it was time for her to give me an answer about the paternity test she'd been dragging her feet on, I sent her the address of the cafe. When I got there after dropping Michael off at school, Stella was already sitting by the window with 2 cups of coffee ordered. I looked at the dark liquid in my cup, hiding a self-deprecating smile. Stella didn't notice. She was gazing out the window, her eyes full of nostalgia. It's been a while since I've been back to NYU. Do you remember Leo? This place used to be a flower shop. The owner had a corgi that was too fat to climb the 2 steps. Since I came to NYU, this spot has been a restaurant, a bookstore, and an anime shop, but I've never seen a flower shop or a corgi. Seeing Stella's gaze flicker away for a moment, I didn't press her. I just smiled openly. I know. All your memories of NYU are tied to Howard. Stella's hand, holding the coffee cup, paused. Even the most eloquent debater couldn't refute an established fact in such a short time. And she had come to see me only to once again, despicably, beg me to adopt Caden with her. When I mentioned the test, I could read the retreat in her expression. She was afraid. Leo, if Caden really is my son, will you divorce me? Stella said that the day before the alumni reunion, Howard had suddenly returned to the country and asked to meet her that night, but not to rekindle their old flame. He and his fiancée were in trouble with their startup, and he borrowed all the money I had saved up during grad school. So that's why. Stella had been taking on projects for her company even then. I had just assumed that since she married me right after finishing her master's, she didn't have the money for a down payment. I never knew that money had long been lent to Howard. Stella said that after that day, she had completely let go of Howard. I wanted to believe her, so I offered a compromise. Stella, she said, frowning. Howard's relatives are all back in his hometown, and there are no good schools there. Besides, Caden, I cut her off, my words becoming more aggressive. I waited for Stella to fight back, waited for her to convince me with her words, just like she did time and time again on the debate stage. But this time, she simply conceded. Leo, stop being unreasonable. Stella slammed her coffee cup on the table. We're talking about Caden. A wave of sadness washed over me. Suddenly, this kind of opponent seemed incredibly boring. Well, Stella, let me tell you clearly right now, I will never agree to adopt Caden. If you insist, then we'll get a divorce. Stella froze, then stood up to leave without another word. It was only when she went to pay that she learned from Ivy that I was the owner of the shop. As she stepped outside, she suddenly turned back. She looked through the window, and I couldn't tell if she was looking at me or reminiscing about the flowers and the dog she shared with Howard. The fleeting loneliness on her face stretched into an endless road between us, making one want to retreat. I opened my phone and looked up Howard's account. I don't usually look at my social feed, so I hadn't noticed that Howard had unblocked me a long time ago. On all those recent nights when I shared little moments of Michael's growth with her, Stella had been casually looking through my phone. When I was describing the shop I wanted to open, she was brooding over Howard's post. Divorced. I'll never believe in love again. When I was worried about my mother's health, she was losing sleep over his. Friends, I'm back in the country. My numbness over the past few days had allowed the pain to sneak up on me all at once, like a prank. It was like knives and swords scraping me raw. I picked up the coffee and drank it in one gulp, but the expected bitterness never came. I know you don't like espresso, boss, so I secretly added a double shot of sugar to that cup. It shouldn't be too bitter, right? Ivy walked over, the apron tied loosely around her waist accentuating her slender figure. She was holding a Kigo Higashino novel, looking like she hadn't quite finished. Someone I'd only known for a few days remembered I liked sweet things. But Stella had forgotten. But there are some things I could never accept, no matter what. After our unpleasant meeting, Stella and I didn't argue anymore. But it wasn't exactly a Cold War either. We were like a couple forced to live apart, reporting on our lives to each other online. I'd talk about how Michael was doing in preschool, and she'd update me on the progress of finding a school and starting the adoption process for Caden. Her salary was still deposited into my account as usual. Stella sent me a message. It's Michael's birthday tomorrow. Can I bring Caden over to celebrate with him? Lately, whenever Michael asked for his mom, I'd put him off with one lie after another. I felt guilty, but helpless about the current situation. Before bed, Michael was still talking about the Coke braised chicken wings his mom makes. I tried to make them a few times following a recipe, but failed every time. After a moment's hesitation, I agreed and sent Stella the code for the door lock. My parents had only stayed for 2 days before complaining they weren't used to it and went back home. Stella saw the empty rooms but didn't mention moving back in with Caden. That evening, I had just gotten home with Michael when he smelled the chicken wings. Kids are forgiving. He showed no resentment toward Caden and even shared his toys. I was on the balcony taking down the dry laundry. When I came back inside, the dining table was already full. When I saw the dishes, the smile on my face faded with the heat in the air. Steamed crab, stir-fried shrimp, fish and tofu soup. Stella, our son doesn't like seafood. He's afraid of crabs. Did you forget that too? As soon as I finished speaking, Michael climbed into his seat. He saw the bright red crab claw right in front of his nose, and his lip trembled as his eyes turned red. But he sensed the tension between me and Stella in the room. He didn't cry. He just gently took my hand and sat quietly. Stella put down the last dish, steamed sea bass, and then, as if just remembering something, her face filled with apology. Caden wanted to eat it. I glanced at my son and swallowed my anger, moving the plate of chicken wings in front of him. But then Caden suddenly screamed and threw down his chopsticks, startling both Michael and me. Leo, Caden likes chicken wings too. Here, I'll get 2 plates and we can split them. Stella was busy comforting Caden, busy taking the chicken wings away, but she didn't notice the disappointed look in her own son's eyes. Stella. I snatched the plate back and put it in front of Michael. Today is Michael's birthday, not his. How many more times are you going to disappoint me and our son? The dining room fell silent, making Caden's sobs seem even more piercing. Daddy, I want to eat cake. My son's soft voice gave Stella, who was frozen in place, a way out. She brought over the cake and put in the candles. Seeing a smile on my son's face, I was about to breathe a sigh of relief. The doorbell rang. Stella hurried to welcome in an older man, seating him grandly at the head of the table. Leo, this is Ken. I would have guessed even if she hadn't introduced him. She saw me sitting motionless and quickly explained that Ken hadn't met Michael yet and was here to celebrate his birthday. Because Stella's family isn't from here, I rarely had my relatives over, usually visiting them at my parents' place to be considerate of her feelings. But Stella? She didn't even bother to tell me before bringing Howard's son and father into our home. What's next? Was she going to bring back Howard's ashes for a family reunion? I held my tongue, planning to settle the score with Stella after Michael's birthday was over. But Michael hadn't even finished making his wish before Ken blew out the candles, just because he wanted to eat sooner. Leo, technically, you're no relation to us, so I'm a bit worried. Caden has been raised delicately since he was a baby, not like your little rascal. Good thing we have Stella. She treats Caden like her own son. But I have to make one thing clear up front. You can't force the boy to call you dad. His only real father is my son. I slammed my bowl and chopsticks down and looked at Ken. Are you finished? Since you didn't come here with the sincere intention of celebrating a child's birthday, please leave. Ken was trying to intimidate me. What right did he have? I didn't know Stella anything, and there was no reason for me to respect him like an elder. And I certainly didn't owe the Howard family anything that would make me let them waltz into my home and disrupt my life. Stella tried to get between us, begging me to hold my tongue. Even now, all she cared about was Ken's health and Caden's feelings. She didn't even notice Michael covering his ears and running back to his room. My heart turned completely cold. I turned around, pulled a divorce agreement from my bag, and threw it at her. Stella, my son and I don't need you anymore. And one more thing. I glanced at Ken's ashen face. I wasn't going to be a fool. As for their expenses during this time, since it came from our shared marital assets, I reserve the right to pursue reimbursement. Now, please leave. After kicking the 3 of them out, Stella called me many times and sent a flood of apologetic voice messages. She seemed genuinely surprised that I had actually prepared a divorce agreement. But we weren't children anymore. We couldn't just shout the adults are coming to bluff our way out and scare off an opponent. Stella and Howard's entanglement ended the day before that alumni reunion. When Howard got into the accident after returning to the country, it was Ken who contacted Stella. She hadn't technically cheated. Stella said we could discuss what to do with Caden once I calmed down. She hoped I would be the same calm, rational debater from our old days and listen to reason. But perhaps in being with me, she had forgotten that roses also have thorns. Even if they are softer and more sparse, I still kept them as my last line of defense. I would not be the only one to compromise. Stella enrolled Caden in one of the best full-time preschools in the city. After work, she would sometimes visit my parents, buying them clothes or supplements. Other times, she'd wait for Michael at his preschool gate with a new toy. Stella wanted to apologize, to show me in this way that she loved me and was waiting for my anger to cool. She admitted to secretly looking at Howard's posts on my phone, but when Howard called her after returning, she didn't answer and deleted the call record. Stella also promised to convince Ken to let her get a paternity test for Caden to give me closure. And regardless of the result, she would no longer insist on adopting him. But at this point, did it even matter whether she adopted him or not? Even if Caden wasn't her son, he was still Howard's son. She used the debt of gratitude to Ken for helping with her tuition as an excuse, but dozens of families in her village had pitched in back then. Could she ever repay them all? Howard and his ex-girlfriend's failed business venture had also wiped out Ken's savings. He had left in a blaze of glory, returned in disgrace, and died abruptly, leaving Stella with a heart full of regret. Regret isn't a crack that can be mended. The missing piece is a black hole that will suck all the time and emotion I've invested in this relationship into a void. Even if it drained my entire life, I could never fill it. But Stella refused to sign the divorce papers. And because Ken was hospitalized again, she hadn't appeared before me in a long time. Business at the study cafe was getting busy. Ivy's classmates and the younger members of the debate club had done a lot to advertise for me. When I picked Michael up from school, he would sit quietly in a corner. He hadn't asked about his mom in a long time. A child's heart is sensitive. He could feel the cold shoulder he got on his birthday. He preferred playing with Ivy now. Ivy taught him how to solve a Rubik's Cube and do math. A craft project they made together in their spare time won first place in a preschool competition, making Michael admire her even more. The usually quiet cafe was now filled with laughter and cheerful voices, and even the sunlight inside felt a little warmer. A passerby at the open window casually commented on what a happy family of 3 we were. "Aunt Ivy, run. Daddy's about to catch us." "Don't worry, I won't go easy on your dad." Ivy said that, but she deliberately created an opening, letting me grab her apron and snatch Michael away. Michael lost the game but didn't look disappointed. He reached his short arms out to Ivy, wanting to play again. The wind chime on the shop door jingled. Ivy and I turned at the same time to welcome the customer, but our smiles vanished when we saw it was Stella and Caden. As if on cue, Michael, in his childish innocence, said he wanted Ivy to be his mom. Fury ignited in Stella's eyes. Ivy, who knew who Stella was, let go of Michael as Stella lunged for him. "Leo, what kind of nonsense have you been teaching our child? What is she to you?" Faced with Stella's accusation, the twisted spring of my resentment and agony, which had been pressed down to its limit, finally recoiled with force. I shoved Stella hard. "Why don't you take a look at yourself? When your son needed his mother, where were you? Ivy just helped me open this shop and picks up Michael when I can't. But what have you been doing all this time?" Stella's eyes flickered. Before the guilt could show on her face, I turned away. I didn't want to see it. I'd seen enough. "Leo, I know I was wrong. What do I have to do for you to forgive?" The screech of tires outside cut Stella off. Before we could react, Ivy was the first one to rush out. My world turned into a silent film the moment I pushed open the door. I saw Stella, her face pale, screaming something. Ivy was frantically making a phone call. Caden was sitting on the curb, shrieking. Passers-by had stopped, their faces full of pity. And finally, Michael, lying in front of a car, with a soccer ball rolling to my feet. The singular splash of crimson made the blood in my veins run cold. "Michael." "No, Michael." Outside the emergency room, I stared at the blood on my fingers. My body temperature kept dropping, and an uncontrollable trembling made me so weak I could barely stand. "Leo!" Stella rushed to steady me, but I slapped her across the face. I didn't have the strength to hurt her, to teach her a lesson. But what about my son's blood? Witnesses at the scene said that Caden had suddenly snatched Michael's soccer ball and thrown it into the busy street. Michael was hit by a car that couldn't stop in time when he ran to get it. I glanced at Caden, his eyes swollen from crying, standing next to Ivy. Logically, I knew I shouldn't attribute malicious intent to a child. But emotionally, I didn't like him. I didn't want him to have any chance of getting near Michael ever again. "Stella, I can never forgive you." My gaze drifted aimlessly, following every hurried family member walking by. I was terrified. I never wanted to be at the hospital for Michael again. "If you insist on not signing, I will sue. When your presence is no longer beneficial to Michael's mental and physical well-being, I will do whatever it takes to strip you of your visitation rights. That soccer ball. It was the birthday gift you gave him last year. It's so worn out, but he could never bear to replace it. Do you remember what you promised him? That you'd buy him a new one for his birthday this year. But you forgot. Stella's hands, hanging at her sides, clenched into tight fists, her nails digging deep into her palms. She slowly leaned against the wall, buried her face in her arms, and her shoulders began to shake uncontrollably. Thankfully, Michael's injuries weren't severe. After surgery to set the bone, he only needed to be observed in the hospital for a week. Stella was going to take Caden to Ken's place first. Ivy bought some food and stayed with me at the hospital room. Trying to distract me, she started telling me funny stories from when she first started at the university. Back then, there was an old man by the West Gate who'd try to scam students. He cornered me once, and I couldn't get away. It wasn't about the money, but I almost missed an exam. Then, a hero appeared. A senior student talked the old man down in just 3 minutes, leaving him red-faced and scurrying away in embarrassment. Ivy paused, put on a pair of black-rimmed glasses, and looked at me. "Senior, does that ring a bell?" I nodded. No wonder she turned down better-paying part-time jobs. She wanted to repay a favor from years ago. Ivy said she'd watched all my debate competitions on the university website and had even come to my wedding with her upperclassman friend. "I really thought you and Stella were the perfect couple." Perfect? It wasn't easy to achieve that. Because my parents' jobs had us moving frequently when I was a kid, I was always transferring schools right after making friends. I became introverted and quiet, a total misfit in college. I happened to watch a campus debate competition and was captivated by the confident, powerful words of the first speaker, Stella. I decided I had to change. When I first joined the debate club, my speaking skills and thinking were slow. I often held back the team and drew complaints from other members. Quitting would have been the easy way out. But when my resignation was rejected, Stella handed me a notebook. She had stayed up all night reviewing our debates, revising my speeches word by word, and filling the margins with notes on strategies and techniques. It gave me the conviction to keep going. Later, against the club's objections, Stella put me on as the fourth speaker. In the end, I held my ground under pressure and, together with her, we won. My life took a turn onto a smoother path after that victory. I became confident, enjoyed making friends, and started actively pursuing opportunities. That was probably why I fell in love with Stella. But if love itself is unconditional, then I can't say for sure if what we had was really love. I held Michael's hand, suddenly remembering the collision of my heart with Stella's all those years ago. Whether it was love or just the alcohol, neither of us could ever be sure now. Ivy stood up and cleared her throat. Only then did I realize Stella had returned and was standing at the door, having heard who knows how much. After Ivy left, Stella walked over and slowly knelt in front of me. She looked up at me, the sorrow in her eyes completely exposed. "Leo, if you're angry, hit me, yell at me. But to say what we had wasn't love, then what was it? What else could it be?" I calmly pulled my hand from her grasp and thought about it seriously. "I don't know, Stella." The day Michael was discharged, Stella signed the divorce papers. She didn't fight for custody, and the apartment became mine. She stopped letting Ken boss her around and insisted on getting the paternity test first. If it was her responsibility, she wouldn't shirk it. But Ken objected, even claiming it was Howard's dying wish for Stella to take care of Caden. Stella found it hard to break free. My study cafe went viral overnight thanks to a vlogger's review video, becoming one of the most popular photo spots in the city. Even with 2 full-time employees, I was often overwhelmed. Ivy, who had already started her internship, would come help after work. Sometimes, when we worked late into the night, she would heat up a glass of milk for me. We'd chat for a while under the moonlight, and then she'd carry a sleeping Michael on her back as she walked us home. I understood Ivy's feelings, but she had taken what I said in the hospital to heart and wasn't rushing to make things official. That was good. At least we both had enough time to make our choices. One day, Ivy heard news about Stella from the NYU Alumni Network. Because the shop was so busy and the divorce and property division had gone smoothly, And since we regularly communicated about Michael, I never realized how badly things were going for her. Ken treated Stella like his personal servant, calling her at all hours, for any reason. He even made a huge fuss and demanded she accompany him to the hospital during one of her important work meetings. Stella grew increasingly impatient with his behavior. Just as she was up for a promotion, Ken showed up at her company and caused a huge scene. A competitor seized the opportunity, not only getting the promotion but also pushing Stella out of her job. Ken then turned his attention to Stella's severance pay, demanding she use it to send Caden to an expensive study abroad camp. For once, Stella was clear-headed. She saved the opportunity for Michael. When Stella's parents back home heard that our marriage had been ruined by Ken's family, they were so furious they went and smashed the front gate of their house. Unable to find Stella, who had moved, Ken started coming to my shop to harass me and Michael. I presented evidence and stated facts. The same debating skills that once dominated the stage left Ken with nothing to say. And so the connection between Stella and me, which had begun with a debate, came full circle. She taught me confidence. I gave her back her freedom. She was standing tall, but her shadow on the ground looked like it had a broken spine. All her obsessions and struggles during this time had come to nothing. The life she had tried so hard to perform turned out to be just a script. Stella took a step toward me, then hesitated before my impassive gaze. Her eyes were slightly red, like a wrongly convicted prisoner begging for a retrial. "Leo, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please forgive me." She had forgotten. I had said I would never forgive her. And Stella was never innocent. I didn't look back at the sobbing Stella behind me. From now on, I would also try to only look forward. As for the past, no matter how vivid it once was, it would eventually fade and blur under the wash of time, and then be forgotten. Michael wasn't back from his study trip yet, so I went home to spend some time with my parents. "Son, you're the talk of the neighborhood. Do you know why?" My mom, back from her morning exercise, began to recount the story animatedly as I was eating breakfast. "Because of Stella." After Stella's friends learned about her situation from the alumni network, they took her out for drinks. Drunk, Stella didn't go back to her place. Instead, she walked over 10 miles to my parents' apartment complex. The security guard saw how drunk she was and wouldn't let her in since she couldn't give him an apartment number. Stella sat on the edge of a flower bed, and whenever someone passed by, she would mumble, "Leo, I'm sorry." By morning, the whole neighborhood was gossiping. Who is Leo? If she really had any dignity, she would have come to apologize formally. This whole spectacle just gives the neighbors something to laugh about. Besides her satisfaction, a complex look flashed across my mom's face. She was still lamenting the fall of a perfectly good daughter-in-law. Fortunately, Stella didn't actually show up at our door and put us in an awkward position. She kept her distance. I never made things difficult for her during her weekly visits with Michael. At the end of the year, I rented the adjacent storefront and expanded the cafe. Taking a moment to look up from my work, I saw Stella. She had come to pick up Michael from my parents' house for the past 6 months, but I was never there. It had been a long time since I'd seen her. She had lost a lot of weight, and the old trench coat she was wearing seemed to hang off her. It wasn't her scheduled visiting day, but seeing that she had brought a gift for Michael, I didn't say much. Michael looked at the brand new soccer ball but wasn't as interested as he used to be. He put it on the counter and went back to playing with his Legos. He's into drawing and building models lately, but he still likes playing soccer at school. I explained casually, noticing the disappointment in Stella's eyes. "Are you doing well?"
Stella twisted her fingers nervously.
I only then noticed the faint mark on her ring finger, as if she had just recently taken off her ring. "I'm doing great. My parents are healthy, Michael is healthy and well-behaved, and the shop is thriving." I didn't go into details. When the waitress brought our coffee, Stella saw the espresso in front of me and instinctively started to get up to switch them. She knocked over her handbag, and a stack of resumes slid out. I pretended not to see. Once she had gathered them up, I smiled. I've gotten used to it. I actually like the rich flavor now. Sometimes if it feels too bitter, I just add some sugar or milk. It's not like it has to be the same forever. I was talking about the coffee, but Stella's eyes seemed to darken as if she'd thought of something else. Her voice was a little hoarse. Aren't you going to ask how I'm doing? I stirred my spoon without answering, just watching the dark liquid swirl, its rich aroma instantly filling the air. When I looked up again sometime later, Stella was gone. Later in the evening, Ivy came to the shop after work, expertly put on an apron, and started clearing the coffee cups from the tables. Suddenly, she found a bouquet of yellow roses by the chair where Stella had been sitting and brought them to me. Who sent the flowers? Is today a special day? I thought for a moment, then shook my head. Just then, Michael called for us to come see the Lego model he had finished. Ivy casually placed the bouquet on the counter. When we walked away and looked back, it glowed in the dim light, bright as a ray of sunshine.